lowest number of homicides since 1965. Now it may lose a crucial program. The $10 million initiative is funded by Joe Biden era American Rescue Plan Act, an economic stimulus package set to expire this year. Tyrone Bowman live. Welcome to the program on this morning. Let's unpack this story and find out exactly what's going on in Detroit. Negus Vu is from old school Detroit. He grew up in the 1990s and remembers hearing gunshots every night on the west side of the city. I grew up in a gang-related neighborhood, Vu 42 recalled. I definitely was surrounded by violence. I became desensitized to it because it was an everyday thing. And this article that I'm reading is from The Trace. It was written by Josiah Bates this month. So let me get down to it and let's talk about this story once again. Decades later, as a grassroots leader of the People's Action, a nonprofit that works to improve the lives of low-income residents through advocacy and resources, Vu witnessed the same desensitization he experienced, especially among young people during the early years of the COVID-19 pandemic. Vu said guns and crimes soared. As boredom, social media fights, and socio-economic issues drove gang conflicts throughout the city, the number of homicides increased by nearly 19% in 2020, compared to the previous year, consistent with national trends. Gun violence hotspots in Detroit proliferated over the next couple of years. The toll on black communities was part of a decades-long pattern. According to police data, there were 1,994 homicides in the city from 2017 through 2021. About 90% of victims were black and 90% were by gun. To combat the surge, Vu and others pushed the city to fund community violence intervention, especially for the neighborhoods more affected. They were responding to the city's decision to install gunshot detection technology, and wanted to ensure the police weren't the only sources deployed. So let me show you a picture of Vu, who has been working with other local groups, law enforcement, and city officials to sustain the decrease. So here's a picture of the brother right here. Where you kind of have an image of who I'm talking about throughout this broadcast today. So let's get back to the story here. We don't want the cops just jumping out if there's a shot detection and you're frisking and you're harassing people, Vu said. The key element above all is genuine love for these individuals, and with genuine love, you're going to be able to make an impact in their life and in their families' lives. Violence in those hotspots has since been dramatically reduced, according to city officials, thanks in part to Vu and other community-led programs cooperating with the city through a program called Shot Stoppers, launched in 2023 by Mayor Mike Dukin's office. Shot Stoppers is separate from the similarly named Shot Spotter surveillance technology. It provided 6 organizations with funding to autonomously implement their own community violence intervention strategies in specific areas. For the groups to receive more funding, reductions in non-fatal shootings and homicides had to outpace the citywide trend. By the end of October 2024, the city recorded a 45% year-over drop in homicides in the areas where Shot Stoppers was implemented versus 18% in places without it. The decline was more pronounced than the citywide trend as the pandemic wore on. Detroit ended 2024 with 203 homicides, the lowest number since 1965, according to the Detroit Police Department. Now the city could lose the $10 million initiative funded with federal dollars from the American Rescue Plan Act, the Joe Biden era's economic stimulus package set to expire this year. It's unlikely to be renewed as President Donald Trump's administration takes steps to cut relief packages in his second term, though some states, such as neighboring Wisconsin, will continue funding similar programs by taking matters into their own hands. Michigan is in limbo. In 2024, lawmakers there passed two bills to increase public safety and violence prevention funding by more than $200 million, which would have funded shot stoppers in perpetuity. But the legislation died in the House at the end of the legislative session. To be revived, the bills would need to be reintroduced in a House where Republicans now hold a majority. We worked so hard, we've sacrificed so much, and we've learned from the mistakes that we've made, Vu said, noting that his organization's progress is contingent on sustaining the relationship it has built. The magnitude of what is going to happen when the ARPA dollars run out, it's diabolical. Activists on the ground said Detroit's success should be viewed as a benchmark for similarly sized cities in the Midwest. Its gun violence decline is a testament to what's possible when local groups, police, and elected leaders collaborate. But the initiative contradicts newly elected President Trump's calls for punitive enforcement and prosecutions. In one of the executive orders he signed on Inauguration Day, Trump directed state and district attorneys to prioritize, quote, public safety and the prosecution of violent crime and take all appropriate action necessary to dismantle transnational criminal activity in the United States. Let me break that down and tell you what all that crap means. That means make sure that black people are punished no matter what the cost. And make sure white people have all the guns and weapons that they need. Don't punish the white folk. Just make sure you punish black people. Make sure you exaggerate it. Make sure you lie. Make sure you cheat. Make sure you steal. That's what I want you to do. So, I can read through all the verbiage, all the garbage, and all the trash that they try to put in intellectual jargon. So that's exactly what it means. He also pledged to involve federal law enforcement as he did when launching Operation Legend in 2020. I need to take a quick break. This is Tyrone Bowman Live. I'll be back in less than 1 minute. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, consider subscribing to Tyrone Bowman Live. I'll be right back, right after this. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Tyrone Bowman Live. Today I'm talking about the crime reduction that is taking place in the city of Detroit and the remarkable work that an organization is doing uh, from a brother. His name is Negus Negus Vu, and he's president of the People's Action. And he fears that impending federal funding cuts will significantly impact Detroit's violence intervention program. Well, you know what? Sometimes we have to do what we got to do. We got to turn to grassroots fundraising. We don't need to beg nobody for anything. We got enough people of us in this world when we can just do things for ourselves. You'd be surprised how much money we can raise through creative fundraising. So let's get back to this article. We've worked so hard, we've sacrificed so much, and we've learned from the mistakes that we've made. Vu said, noting that his organization's progress is contingent on sustaining the relationships it has built. The magnitude of what is going to happen when the American Rescue Act under the Biden administration, the dollars run out. Activists on the ground said Detroit's success should be viewed as a benchmark for similarly sized cities in the Midwest. Local officials said that since Shot Stoppers began, the Detroit Police Department has been more strategic in its approach to enforcement. We realize that we cannot arrest our way out of crime, said Franklin Hayes, the department's deputy police chief in charge of its Crime Strategies Bureau, adding that cutting violent crime is not just about making arrests, but bringing resources to those areas that usually struggle. We looked at the historic areas where we have seen violent crimes happen and that we just focus on those areas. That's true. That's what they do. They just focus on one area alone. Over the past years, many Detroit neighborhoods have seen a decrease in violent crime, particularly homicides, for example, in Farwell, Franklin Park, Midwest, and Brightmoor, which had double-digit homicide numbers in 2022. Homicides dropped an average of 54%, according to police data. I used to lock up 100 African American men a day, said Pamela McLean, a former commander of the Wayne County Sheriff's Office. Now we're on the other side of helping them with workforce development, workforce training, squashing beefs before they even get out. That's unprecedented. And you know what? That is a true statement. I'm going to tell you the reason why. Because when other people get in all kinds of trouble, they make sure they have all type of diversionary programs in place to help them get back on track. This thing about just punishment, it doesn't solve anything. It creates hardness of hearts. McLean, who now works as a liaison between the mayor's office and the community groups participating in Shot Stoppers, said the success comes from the interdependency of all sides. Local nonprofits, law enforcement, and politicians, and the trust they have built. Shot Spotters takes a unique approach relative to other community violence intervention strategies. It is autonomous, allowing the groups to use the strategies they feel that work best, resolving conflict, designating resource centers, and hosting a community events for the needs of the area. Each of the 6 groups works in its own zone of the city, around 4 square miles, and started with a $175,000 grant investment. City officials then measured how many homicides and non-fatal shootings occurred in each group's zone and compared to those numbers to the rest of Detroit, including in the previous 2 years. If the numbers drop more than in the rest of the city's groups, could receive up to $175,000 per each quarter. The city would not have the success it's experienced without the community partnership, Haynes said. He said he hoped decision makers see the results and the direct impact that this program has had. It is an anchor in our crime strategy. Force Detroit works in the working class Warrendale neighborhoods on the city's west side, where residents have a strong identity. Force's goal is to reach those young black men who can either be targets or shooters and engage with them directly to de escalate potentially deadly disputes. As a volunteer, after his release from prison in 2019, Daquan Zoe Kennedy was helping to develop the group's outreach efforts when he observed the nature of the gun violence they were witnessing. It wasn't a result of people hanging out on the block or in front of convenience stores selling drugs or shooting at random. It was interpersonal action. As Force's newly appointed executive director, Kenny is using his experience to direct the remedy for targeted violence conflict mediation. We try to minimize the possibility of conflict amongst people who live around each other, he said. So here's a photo of Daquan Zoe Kennedy, and he is the executive director of Force Detroit. It covers its concern that cutting resources will set the city back. So let me kind of blow this brother up here. You can tell he's a no-nonsense brother. So he's not playing out there in those streets. Grassroots workers know the city's decline in violence is dependent on more than a single program. But these resources are key, they said, to sustain their progress. A lot of people put in work for us to get to this point, but we still got stuff we need to work on as a community, Zoe said. The Trace's analysis of gun violence trends over the past decade found that gun violence in major American cities plummeted between 2023 and 2024 after peaking in the 2 years prior. If the drop in Detroit's most afflicted neighborhoods is any indication of the effects that resources like shot stoppers can have, then it has proven the value of community violence intervention. Vu said the freedom that each organization's leaders have to put together their own strategies is replicable in other places, even if the circumstances around gun violence are different. As a question about the future of funding swirl, some community leaders lament how politics has found its way into the conversation at all. People forget, when we talk about gun violence in our city, it's young black men carrying the weight, said Ray Winans, who runs Detroit's Friends and Family, another Shot Stoppers group. Well, have you ever stopped to think about this? Republican politicians don't want black people to not be engaged in crime. They want to try to justify their congressional paychecks and the senatorial perks. They want to justify the theme of law and order. Meanwhile, you got real criminals like the Proud Boys and the Insurrection Boys and the KKK running around covering up their faces in uniformity because they are afraid to be seen on camera, because half of them are probably judges and lawyers and doctors and police officers. That's why they don't want to be seen. See, crime makes money. Crime keeps prisons full. Crime keeps food on the table for those who work within the Department of Corrections. Crime keeps their retirement funds loaded, their 401k stacked. Crime enables them to be able to live a lifestyle that they wouldn't ordinarily live. Crime causes prisons to be built in white rural areas where they house black men by the dozens. That's what crime does. Crime causes privatization of prisons to flourish. The prison industrial complex could not flourish. Stockholders could not make money. Investors could not get a return on the profits that they hoped to get if the prison wasn't filled with black people. That's the reason why they don't want to fund anything pertaining to crime reduction, self-sufficiency, rehabilitation, and homicide reduction. This program right here, I deal with real life issues. This is not one of those YouTube channels, and I'm not a YouTube creator who deals with gossip and all the other trash. They got to find that someplace else. So, Zoe Force, Detroit's leader, said he appreciates the credit the community is getting for the turnaround, when so often it takes the blame for the violence. But he fears waking up to an old reality. We made history according to everybody, he said. Who's going to go down in history for not making sure the bill is passed? We know who went down in history for everything else that happened in our city. Tyrone Bowman, never surrender, never quit.